My back sucks, according to Reddit. So I'm going to read you this whole post, which is very interesting, give you my thoughts, and then tell you how I'm going to go about correcting this weakness, if there is one. So this is from a natty or not thread that I got sent. These are always fun. And it reads, I'm really unsure on this guy, to be honest. His strength sucks. Fair enough. His chest sucks. His back, lats and lower traps, sucks. His legs are okay. All right, here we go. Then he just has these ridiculous arms, big shoulders, and big upper traps. If I was a gambling man, would that be cool if you could actually bet on it if people were... Anyway, I'd go not lifetime natty with like a 60% confidence, but there's still a high chance that he's natty.
So you're telling me there's a chance?
So what do I think of that? Actually, I think it's pretty much spot on. I think that's a pretty fair assessment overall. No one is going to be like, bro, you have lagging arms. No, they're pretty clearly a strong point. Now, in my defense, my back has actually improved quite a bit. So it's not a strong point, but it's a lot better than it used to be. And actually, it has improved more than my arms in terms of percentages. About 3.5 years ago, in September 2019, I had a 40-inch chest. So chest measurement is the chest, but it's also the back. So I went from a 42-inch chest up to 47.5 inches now. That is a 12% increase. And my arms went from 16 and 16.5 inches up to 17.5 and 17.75 inches, which is about an 8.5% increase. So actually, my chest measurement has improved more. Now, we all have our strengths and we all have our weaknesses. It's super rare to see a physique where everything is exactly proportional and in balance. When you do see it, it's actually pretty cool because that's how rare it actually is. And I would say that for me, one of my biggest strengths are my triceps, specifically the triceps long head. Now, the lat, the main function, is shoulder extension. So a neutral grip pull-up, shoulder extension. Chin up, shoulder extension. Pull down, shoulder extension. Standing cable pull-over, shoulder extension. Dumbbell pull-over, shoulder extension. A row, shoulder extension. Okay, so the lat is going to be working pretty hard in all of those. But the triceps long head is also going to be working for a lot of those movements, especially the straight arm ones. Now, I can actually feel the long head of my triceps working even during neutral grip pull-ups and pull-downs, which I think is probably pretty uncommon, but your body will recruit the strongest muscle for the job, or the most efficient muscle for the job. And so if you have a muscle that is strong, it's a strength because you've trained it a lot, or could be genetic, it's going to tend to take over from other muscles. And the lats are notoriously stubborn, partly because they're hard to see, they're in the back of the body, but also because other muscles are almost always going to be assisting in those movements that train the lats. So if you look at something like shoulder extension, long head of the triceps, lats, also rear delts, also teres. Sometimes people will also use their abdominals. So how often have you seen doing a pull down and then this, right? They're crunching, not to get shoulder extension, but because that moves the weight and you don't have to use shoulder extension. And so for me, it's kind of been a balancing act because on some rows, my biceps will take over. And then on some like straight arm stuff or overhead work, vertical pulls, my triceps will take over. So it's been tough to find like that perfect angle where it's not biceps and it's not triceps, but it is lats. And so it's easy to get into this situation where your strong points are just getting stronger and your weak points don't really seem to be getting the love and attention that they deserve. And so sometimes I think that weak point correction, it's not just throwing in more and more volume, because again, you get that vicious circle where some muscle groups are growing and then other ones just aren't, regardless of how much you are doing. Another very, very common situation is someone who has a very strong front delt, some Derek-looking MFer, and their chest is a weakness. So when they're bench pressing, For them, it's like a lying overhead press, basically. So it's just going to be a lot of delt, a little bit of chest, but the chest doesn't really get any kind of stimulation. And so they need to find a way to take the front delt out of it so that the chest can actually get some stimulation. And so this might be, tucking the elbows a little bit more. This could be a pause on the chest. This could be using a reverse grip. This could be a Smith machine, some way to try to contract the chest and take that front delt out of it. I see some guys bench pressing out here, and I say, hey, do you feel your chest? And I'm like, nah, not really. Well, was your chest growing from this? Not really. Well, yeah, what a surprise, because a lot of it is front delt. And so, sometimes you might have to use pre-activation, pre-exhaustion. You might need to, burn it out at the end in order to get it sore so you actually know what that muscle group feels like when it's sore. And sometimes you have to train when sore. I've had some success doing this where I just power bombed a movement, a muscle group just absolutely destroyed it. And then the next day or the next day after, when it was super, super sore, then I went to train it. Because when a muscle group is sore, it's a lot easier to feel. Now, you probably shouldn't do that all the time, but it can be effective. Because, man, your motor cortex is freaking smart. I mean, you don't even have to think about it usually. And so sometimes you have to really think about it in order to activate the areas that your body doesn't really want to activate because they're too weak, so that you get them stronger, so that they're no longer weak, so that you can actually activate them.
Well, then who's playing first?
Yes.
I mean, the fellow's name on first base.
Who?
The fellow playing first base for St. Louis.
Who?
The guy on first base.
Who is on first?
Well, what are you asking me for?
And it's kind of roundabout. There have been some pretty cool studies about this where they take mice and they cut one muscle group of the calf and the other one grows to compensate. Now, I'm not exactly going to cut my triceps to grow my lats, but it's just a useful way of thinking about it. You have to shut off one area so that you can grow the other. Now, does this mean you should stop training your strong points? Am I just never going to do another curl or overhead extension again? Well, it depends on your goals. If you are a competitive bodybuilder, yeah, you might want to stop training some areas so that they become more in proportion with other areas, because there's a bunch of judges judging you, and that's what you want to accomplish. Now, for me, the only people judging me is the entire internet, so it's a completely different situation. But I would say build whatever kind of physique you want. If you want to have a physique where the torso musculature is not super, super developed, and you just have like what other people would consider to be disproportionately huge arms, I don't see anything wrong with that. I think you're better off focusing on exercise selection and intention and execution rather than trying to make your strong points into weaker points so that your weak points are now strong points, and you're like trading some muscle for muscle elsewhere, and then you can bring your strong points up back later. I've heard some people try to do that. Sometimes it works. Often it doesn't really seem to accomplish very much at all. And so I would say you're better off making small tweaks and changes rather than just ceasing training an area altogether. Plus, sometimes if you have a freaky muscle group, you're better off just going all in on that rather than just trying to like shortchange yourself and then have everything in proportion but nothing really stands out, right? Like, oh, now you're the back guy, or you are the chest guy, or the arm guy, or the quad guy, right? Like, would we even know Tom Platz if everything was like kind of okay everywhere? No, like he has a legacy of having just awesome adductors and tremendous quads. I couldn't think of anything that started with Q. Disappointing. Quantum quads. Queenly quads. Now, genetics are a factor here. Let's be real. It's not like they aren't, especially when it comes to insertions and muscle bellies, etc. But you would never look at one of my before pictures and be like, that guy is going to have freaking huge arms. No, like it just, you have to train in order to know your potential, right? And it's not just training for a year, it's training for many years, and then you can see where you're at, okay? So anyone who's like, I have everywhere as a weak point. Come on. I do think that sometimes how a muscle looks will be quite genetically determined. Not necessarily the overall size, although that as well. But, from the front, My lats, they don't really like stick out and wrap around the rib cage. Whereas I see some people, like if you look at young pictures of Dorian Yates, I mean, it's almost ridiculous at how wide they are and how wide they go out around the rib cage. And I think a lot of that probably is genetics. So, do I have any plans of changing my lat training? Yes, actually. I think I'm going to incorporate some of the Brian Bornstein N1 stuff where you're going across the body. It does feel like it is less triceps than with like a typical standing cable pullover or pull up or pull down or whatever. And so I think going across the body and using the rib cage to stretch the lat one arm at a time can be something that is useful. And it's something that I will probably incorporate in my training sometime this year. It might be after the cut, just because realistically, if you're natural and you're getting very lean, which I will be doing this summer, you're probably not going to be gaining a ton of lean body mass in that process, but I might play around with it just to see how it goes. I will probably also keep working on the standing cable pullovers as well as dumbbell pullovers. This is a movement that I've used several times on and off over the years, and Natural Hypertrophy seems very, very happy with his results in terms of lats, so I have recently reincorporated those, and I do think that they work quite a bit of long head of the triceps for me, and obviously there's no tension past right around here, but I do think that they have quite a unique feeling, and I'll see how those progress. Once you've been lifting for a year or 2 years or 3 years and now you're an intermediate, you'll probably notice that some areas just grow a little bit more easily and more quickly than others. And it's not really hard to identify weak points. Anyone who is taking out a magnifying glass or, really overanalyzing things, it's just not needed, right? Like, even people who don't lift can be like, wow, look at your arms, wow, like that's crazy. Whereas, no one really says, damn, your back is insane. So I think you can tell pretty easily on if something is a weak point. Now, if you want to correct it, that's another story. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with having a slightly imbalanced physique. I don't think it really necessarily leaves you open to injuries, right? Like, does having big lats prevent shoulder injuries or something? Probably not. But they do look cool, and so I will be bringing them up, or continue to keep bringing them up over the next few years. And as with everything, it's basically a work in progress. I'm always trying to keep learning and keep growing, and those two things basically go hand in hand. Because the more you know, the more you grow. Anyway, for those of you interested in knowing more and hopefully growing more, although that is on you, you have to implement everything, definitely check out my books. They will help you a lot in your fitness journey. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.